1981, I flew to Greece and then made my way up slowly through northern Greece to Bitola, and then through Macedonia and Serbia, through all of Bosnia, and came to the Smeltera Folklore in Zagreb for the first time, and then I went to Bulgaria. And then in 1982, no, that was 1980. In 1981, I got a scholarship from the Bulgarian government to study in Plovdiv, and so I went there for a year. And that's where I realized that really the dances of the Slavic populations, the Christian populations, were all sort of dead. They still existed in folklore ensembles, but if you really wanted to find live tradition, you had to look among particularly the Roma, but also the Turkish minorities and the Pomaks and so on, and that took my interest further to the east. And from there, while I was in Bulgaria, I was invited by the Turkish State Dance Ensemble to go to Turkey. So after a year in Bulgaria, I went to Turkey as a guest of the state ensemble and lived in Ankara, and started looking more at Eastern things. And then in 1983, I moved to Germany, thinking I would go there for half a year to study German and ethnology, and ended up studying, it's been now 25 years or something that I've lived there. And while I lived in Germany, it was much more convenient for me, particularly before the war, to go into research in the Balkans. So I was in ex-Yugoslavia maybe 20 times. You put it together at least a year of time. But then I started also doing research in further fields. So I continued to go back to Turkey. I went to Armenia. Recently I've been to Georgia. I went to Egypt, to Tunisia, to Morocco many, many times. This summer for the first time in Algeria, also to Pakistan twice. And in addition to places that were difficult to go to, like Iran or Afghanistan, because it was war or Islamic Revolution and Americans were not exactly heartily invited, I had the opportunity to work with immigrants. So before I left Los Angeles is called Tehrangeles by the Iranian community because there's so many Iranians there, particularly artists. That's where they went to because music and dance was forbidden after 1979, after the Islamic Revolution. So in Tehrangeles, which has an Iranian yellow pages that's this big, I had the opportunity to work with really well-known musicians and dancers. And then I continued to be interested in immigrant culture when I lived in Germany, and then when I lived in Canada for a while, and every other place that I've gone. So I've confronted or met Iranians in Denmark, in Sweden, in Norway, and wherever it's possible to work with them, and with Afghanis. In the last couple of years, I've sort of lost contact with a lot of my colleagues in Germany because I'm traveling so much, so that I don't, 10 years ago I knew who everyone was, and there are so many new people on the scene now, and I'm traveling so much, it's hard to keep
I saw it's like all there in this huge long list, like going to like, oh my God, where do we sleep, and when, and how do we,
For instance, that's the problem today, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
When do I sleep?
Do you have any free time at all?
Yes, well luckily it goes in spurts, so usually I'm on the road for 3 to 5 weeks, and then I'm home for a couple of weeks. When I'm home, I'm still teaching, I'm still working, but I have a lot more free time.
Then you're having
living out of a
tea with tamarind.
Pardon?
Having tea with tamarind.
Having
tea with tamarind, darling.
Having tea with Tamerlane. Yeah, Tamerlane and I work together. She was studying I have a training project going on in Germany, in Seattle, and she was taking part in it until her schedule got to be too difficult. So it's nice to have another colleague that's equally engaged as she is, so that we can exchange.
You have mentioned that you've been to Algeria.
Yes.
And I have read somewhere on the internet that you're participating in one festival, and you're in jury.
I was in 2 festivals, actually. That was this summer. And I was invited to the festival in Sidi Belabès and a festival in Tizi Ouzou. Sidi Belabès is in western Algeria, close to the Moroccan border. And it turned out that I wasn't only on the jury, I was the president of the jury at that festival. And then I was asked to perform also. So and they wanted that I performed Algerian dancing, which was a little bit, is this going to be good enough? So I performed Willid Nile and an Andalusian dance, and had lots of wonderful comments, and millions of interviews. It was being like a rock star, really, being in Algeria. And then we went to Tizi Ouzou, which is the capital of the Kabyle Berber region, which is just an hour east of Algiers. And that was a festival that was also international, but just Arab and African world. And I was on the jury there with some very important, interesting people, the head of the National Ballet and the main dance ethnologist and the director of a theater and people like that. So it was very interesting to meet those people.
Was there any competition going on?
Yeah, the festivals were both competitions, yeah, so we had to choose
Really?
people, yeah.
What about the criteria?
Yes, well, in the second festival, I had no choice about the criteria. Or I put in my 2 cents, but we were a large, powerful group of people who all had their own opinions. In the first festival, since I was the president of the festival, I could sort of decide what criteria I thought was important, so if I can remember it. Of course, dance tradition, if it fits to the tradition. So what's the difference between an Izborny ensemble, a really village ensemble that's doing its own stuff, or one of those kuds that does pan-Croatian or pan-Yugoslav, whatever. So there's a big difference. If it was overly choreographed, how much choreography was there, how well the choreography resembled real tradition. What was the costume like? What was the music like? How good was the technique of the dancers? Because often they look at dance ensembles and the dancers are blamed for bad choreography, or the choreographers are blamed for bad dancers. So if we could pull those 2 things apart. And then we gave some extra points for a good soloist. If there was a particularly good singer, a particularly good musician, or one dancer that really stood out as a soloist, then we also gave things like that. And I refused to have a first, second, and third place like is normal in these festivals. So instead, we chose the 3 best groups, and then we gave, and they had to be good in all around. They had to be good in every single one of the things. And then if there was one group that was really excellent in, for instance, the group from Portugal had excellent costumes, very good musicians, very good reproducing of culture, but they weren't the greatest dancers. So they got certificates for the things that they were really strong in. Same thing for the Slovenians. We gave them something for tradition. I really liked the fact that the Slovenian group had lots of different ages that reflected real life. Their costumes were excellent, things like that.
So, what do you think is more important in the competition? Is the pure technique or the expressiveness?
It depends on what kind of festival you're going to. If you're going to a festival of traditional dance, then it should represent tradition. It shouldn't be choreographed folklorism. And if you're talking about a belly dance competition, then that's something different. That's an artistic creation, and then you're talking about art and not necessarily tradition.